Our scriptures this morning start with Isaiah, and there's a reference to Ahaz. I didn't know who that was, so I had to look it up. So King Ahaz was the 12th king of the southern kingdom of Judah. He was widely regarded as an ungodly, wicked king, and yet, despite the depravity that pervaded Ahaz's life, God eventually spoke to King Ahaz through the prophet Isaiah, delivering one of the most important prophecies regarding the promised Messiah, the true King of Israel. So let us hear these words from Isaiah chapter 7, verses 10 to 16. Again the Lord spoke to Ahaz, saying, "Ask a sign of the Lord your God. Let it be deep as Sheol, the abode of the dead, or high as heaven." But Ahaz said, "I will not ask, and I will not put the Lord to the test." Then Isaiah said, "Hear then, O house of David. Is it too little for you to weary mortals that you weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, the young woman is with child, and shall bear a son, and shall name him Emmanuel. He shall eat curds and honey by the time he knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good. For before the child knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land before whose two kings you are in dread will be deserted." Our second reading is our psalm, found on Voices United, page 794, Psalm 80. Shepherd of Israel, hear us. You who lead Joseph like a flock, you who are enthroned amidst the cherubim, shine forth before Ephraim, Benjamin, and Manasseh. Stir up your might, come and save us. God of hosts, how long will you be angry with your people's prayer? You have fed us with the bread of weeping and given us tears in plenty to drink. You have made a mockery of us to our neighbors, and our enemies laugh us to scorn. Let your hand rest on the one at your right hand, on the one you have made strong for yourself. Then we will never forsake you. Give us life, and we will call on your name. And our final reading this morning is from Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 to 25. Now the birth of Jesus the Messiah took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been engaged to Joseph, but before they lived together, she was found to be pregnant from the Holy Spirit. Her husband Joseph, being a righteous man and unwilling to expose her to public disgrace, planned to divorce her quietly. But just when he had resolved to do this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." All this took place to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet Isaiah. "Look, the virgin shall become pregnant and give birth to a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel," which means God is with us. When Joseph awoke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took her as his wife, but had no marital relations with her until she had given birth to a son, and he named him Jesus.
Well, how do you all feel about surprises? Does it depend on the surprise? You know, the kid's toy I hate the most is the Jack in the Box. You know, you're innocently da-da-da-da-da, and suddenly, bam, scare kids out of their minds. I know of a church that eliminated every surprise they could because they were televised. And so there was a big monitor on the back that had the name of whoever was supposed to be up on the platform and how many seconds until they had to be off again. And that was the worship team, that was the prayers, that was the minister. I don't know if they had a hook to pull them off if they went too long. Because at exactly the hour, they had to be singing the second hymn while the camera rolled off. Everybody who went up on that platform had to be camera ready. And it was quite an operation, and everything worked perfectly until the Sunday the fire alarm went off. Yeah, and it wasn't even a real fire. It was a faulty sensor or something. And the worship team was up on the platform, and they all stood there with their microphones thinking, what are we supposed to do? Do we leave the building? Do we stand and sing? And the ushers were at the back saying, do we have everyone stand? Do we exit? And eventually everybody ended up in the parking lot, and they were milling around, and this time there are no microphones, there are no bulletins, there's some of the people who had been sitting next to each other or in front of each other for a decade, who had never ever spoken to each other, they started up conversations. And at the end, somebody said, well, let's have a prayer, and then they all went home. But for years afterwards, people said, that was the best fellowship we ever had in this church. Sometimes God uses surprises. But imagine the night you find out that your life is going to change completely by a situation that you did not choose and you cannot control, and this is going to be really tough to explain to anybody else. And that's where Joseph is when Matthew opens the Christmas story. Before there were angels, before there were shepherds, before there were wise men, there is a man waking up one morning with a big decision that could cost him his reputation, it could cost him his future, it could cost him his peace. And God didn't give him a lot of background information on this. Just a surprise. Some people, there's nothing really spectacular about them, but they're really profoundly good, decent human beings. Joseph was that kind of guy. He was faithful to the law, which meant he understood completely that this young woman to whom he was engaged, who was somehow pregnant and it wasn't him, that she would have to be put away and she would be in disgrace and her child would be known as the bastard. But that was really on her, it wasn't on him. And Joseph, fundamentally decent guy, actually cared about what was going to happen to her and the baby. And rather than publicly shame her for being pregnant, he decided to go through with the wedding, and he would quietly divorce her afterwards, because in that culture, a divorced woman with a child had a much better future than a woman who just had a baby out of wedlock. He stepped up and did the decent thing. And here's what we learn. And some of you have already learned this. God's activity in your life can be disruptive even when you're just doing the right thing. And the story of Christmas does not begin with peace, it begins with surprise! So your life is not going to go the way you thought it was going to go. The angel said, do not be afraid. What is conceived in her is by the Holy Spirit. You are part of something bigger than you ever expected now. No detailed plan, no timeline, no assurance that Joseph can avoid any future trouble this could possibly bring on him. What does the angel actually give him? A name and a hint. His name would be Jesus, and he would save his people from their sins. Sometimes, all I've wanted from God is just a few answers. Some simple explanation would be nice. But instead, God just turns up and gives you the courage to go on, to keep on keeping on. And in the Gospel according to Matthew, as we heard Jane read this morning, some over 500 years earlier, something the prophet Isaiah had said, "The young woman shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel." And Emmanuel does not mean God is out there somewhere. Emmanuel means God is with us. How would you feel? How do you feel when you hear the doorbell ring and it wasn't somebody you were expecting? How are you going to respond? Are you going to pretend what if it's someone you know? Are you going to pretend you're not home? Yes. Are you going to answer the door and get rid of them as fast as you can? Are you going to tell them you already have plans and they can't come in right now? Would you really be happy to let them in? It's a culture change, isn't it? Joseph had to make out this quick decision. Do I let this Jesus, who doesn't even exist for me, that right now it's just a figment of Mary's imagination? My life is going just fine without him. And Joseph, instead, he stepped up and did the most decent thing he could do. He took Mary as his wife to live in his home, names the child Jesus, which means now he is on the hook for raising this child. He embraces the call of whatever this thing is God says this child is going to do, and he promised that he would hang in there even if things got really tough, which they did pretty fast. You know, Christmas faith isn't waiting until you are sure. It's just action based on the little bit of faith you've got. If you know, one of the things I found over and over again talking to people, if you treat the other person as if you love them and care about them, the feelings come after. And if you live and act as if you have faith and trust in God, the feelings follow after. We're 4 days from Christmas? How are you feeling about that? You know, I imagine some of us are feeling joyful, anticipating the surprises. I have a daughter who, when she was little, would shake those Christmas presents down until she knew what was in every box. Some are waiting with overwhelm. You've got 2 stat holidays and all the same amount of work to be done. And you're hosting Christmas dinner, and 3 of them are vegetarian, 2 are vegan, and 1 is paleo. Oh, yeah. Or you may be feeling sadness because you remember other Christmases, and it's not that. There's somebody you miss. Or you may be navigating situations that you did not choose, and you don't know what the future holds. I mean, Christmas clearly does not promise that your life is going to be easy. Emmanuel is not God on the other end of the security camera in some room, more or less kind of paying attention to what's happening on the screen. God is not like a far distant call center where the person you get on the line doesn't actually have the authority to do anything that's helpful. Emmanuel, God, is the unexpected stranger ringing our doorbell, forcing the question, do I really want to see anybody today? Do I really want to let them into my house? Doesn't he understand that if he doesn't call first, we already have plans? I don't owe this Jesus that kind of commitment. Right now to me, he's just a figment of Mary's imagination. He's a dream I had. He's a nightmare I had last night. The trouble is we don't make God exist or not exist based on whether we believe in God or don't believe in God. We just open the door or we turn the deadbolt. Emmanuel, God is with us. If you've ever felt alone or overwhelmed or spiritually numb, or just angry because you were trying to do the right thing, and suddenly life just tosses you the kind of surprise that you were not looking for. Christmas tells us that God is probably not going to give you much of an explanation. It tells us that the right thing does not always earn us a trouble-free life. It tells us that when life gets messy, God is not likely going to lift you out of the mess. God is going to step into the mess with you with a mop. Sometimes we just have to trust him, and clarity comes later, sometimes a lot later. So 2 important questions for you to consider this morning. Is there an area of your life where at some time in the past or present, God has asked or is asking you to trust? And instead of peace, you get anxiety or impatient, impatient with everybody around you and yourself. It just spills over on everything, because trust is really hard when you're not in control. Who pulled that fire alarm? How can Mary be having a baby? Why now of all time? Why her of all people? In what area of your life has God been telling you to trust? What's stopping you? What would obedience look like for you? You can open that door, peek out through the curtains, trying to make them not move. What is the next step of faith that God has for you? Even if you don't completely understand it, what are you going to do about it?